Well,
Well,
hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on the mock checklist. There might be a glitch or two that we didn't expect. We're going to do the best we can to make sure that everything's okay. But we're also streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Facebook, my page. If you haven't connected with me, you can still see it on my page if you go there. It should appear if you find Mark Anthony Dyson, of course, or Mark A. Dyson, one of the two. Uh, Wanting to welcome also my co-host, Damian Burkle. He is the founder of Professional Transition that's helped 10,000 folks find jobs since 1992 and two times author. How are you, sir?
I am doing fine. Thank you. Glad to be here, as
Good
always.
deal. Good deal. And look who we have back. Claudia Miller. You might remember from earlier episodes last fall, or was it earlier this one too? I lose time, but she is joining us as a guest this time instead of a co-host like she did last time. Threw her right in the fire. She came out okay. So I said, yeah, she's got to come back and join us. So thank you, Claudia, for being here with us.
No, thank you for having me on the show. I'm so happy to be
Yes.
back.
Yes, and it's been kind of cool because we've talked outside the premises as well and tried to collaborate on a few other things as well. So that's it's a relationship now. It's no longer
Mhm.
just somebody that's using me for this platform. Anyway, not to say that you ever, not to say that you ever did or anyone would, but this is the fun stuff, and I only invite the best of the best back. So feel good about that, Claudia.
Thank you.
We are here talking about job interviews, and I feel like being that employers are playing this game now of having 8 to 14 interviews, that now we've got to encourage people on their interviewing skills and how to get multiple interviews while they're interviewing 3 to 6 months and doing so many interviews, right? I mean, that's only fair. If companies are using whatever they can to vet this candidate, why shouldn't the better candidate go and find 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different companies to interview during that period of time? So there could be some dynamics we haven't counted on. We didn't count on such a long interview process before. I think during the Great Recession, and I'm just giving kind of a prelude, during the Great Recession, there was this thing where people, when it was no longer considered the recession, that companies decided to make interviews. They gave them 2 or 3 interviews, but then they will hold off on a decision for 3, 6 months or for a year. So here we are again. This time they're putting people and having them jump through more of the hoops. So what I want to do is try to get some clarity, help people get perspective and clarity on how they can get multiple interviews simultaneously. So I'm going to start with the smart girl here, Claudia. I I call her Miss Claudia. Uh, she is, and you work with a lot of clients. I mean, your client load. From what you described to me once, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I could do that again. But 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 really, but that's great. But are you seeing that people are going through a number of interviews, or maybe unusual interview process than they had prior to the pandemic?
I definitely have seen an increase, and I mean, I get it. There's a lot of people applying to jobs, so it's just very competitive at this moment. But I do agree that 3 6 month interviews are just way too long, and companies that are having this long interview process, like they're going to lose some top talent because they're also going to be
Mhm.
interviewing with other companies. And one advice I have, like if you're job searching, is don't just rely on that one company. Like avoid one-itis. Have multiple companies, start networking, tapping into your network. If not, start building a network, start connecting with people so that way there are multiple offers coming in. So if it is delayed, you kind of are already working through interviews, and then you can kind of assess like where are you, like what are the job offers, and you can even come to the company and let them know. By the way, I've already received 3 offers already, but I'm really interested in working here. Can you give me a little bit of a timeline? I do have to respond by this date. But is there any way we can accelerate this? Because I would really want to work, at XYZ company. And some of them are receptive. Others are like, nope, sorry, congrats that you got a job offer, and we'll just, pull you from the interview process. But at that point, kind of take ownership of it instead of just interviewing with that one company and then they're taking you through all these hoops and, who knows, because they could also, because it is delayed, now it's open up for opportunity of, oh, now there's a budget cut, or now there's a hiring freeze, and all of a sudden you kind of invested so much time and that was your only company you've been interviewing with this whole time. So you kind of want to like diversify when you're interviewing.
Yeah, great points. Damian?
I agree with all that, and all excellent points. A couple of other things in that same kind of multiple interview, in addition to having salary freezes, also think about the the timeline and the calendar, because many times a corporation will either end their year on 12/30/31 and start on the 1st of January, which means new funds for new positions, or they start like we used to do at Sara Lee, which was start in July. And so what that means is if you keep that in the back of your mind, if they know that they have positions that they're going to fill January 1st, they could easily start interviewing in September, October, and drag it all the way through until they get the funding. So that's an important thing to know. And as we were saying, if you're going to go to an employer and say, look, it's been great, but I have other offers, does this have anything to do with tying into your fiscal calendar? And if you learn that, then you're also at a decision point from the standpoint where you might go, man, this is mid-November. I can't wait to hear back from them until January or late December or whenever they decide to return the call. And I think that's very important to know. I think another thing is ask yourself, how does it feel? How do you feel at the end of a interview? And the reason why I mentioned that is I read a couple articles yesterday where human resource decision makers were referring to potential employees as human capital. And that's a term that just drives me nuts, because human capital to me is like saying it's a part or a piece, and it can be easily moved from here to there. And oh, by the way, when it gets old or rusty, you just pick up that part and cast it aside and go on and find the next one. My point in this whole thing is, one, as has been said, don't invest 100% of your efforts in just one company effort, one company hiring situation, because that isn't fair to you. Because if or when it falls through, and trust me, I have been out of work a number of times, and when you're interviewing for that position and it's the only one that you have, and that position, for whatever reason, you don't get, it is absolutely devastating. I can remember explaining to my wife that a position where I was a quote unquote insider, when that didn't come through, it felt like a spear that had been jabbed right through my heart, out the other side, and then yanked back again. Fortunately, I had a couple of other jobs in the offing, but I was so excited about this position. It was perfect for me. And it didn't work out. And my point is, you're not being fair to yourself if you're only pursuing one job opportunity. It's important for you to have as many fish in the barrel, if you will, or as many torpedoes in the waters of employment as possible. And then one last thing, Claudia was talking about going back to the company and saying, I have 2 or 3 offers here. When can I expect to hear back from you? And that's one way to accelerate an offer. It's a great strategy to use because then you find out what their real intent is. If they know that you're the candidate, they're not going to let you go. But if you're not, then they've also told you, a little bit about where they are in the hiring process and how they feel about you. And, if it's not right for you, don't worry about it. Move on.
Well, though you got several great points, but I want to go back to Claudia with this particular question. And you know this, Damian, because we teach this. You've taught it in your book. We teach it everywhere we go practically, and Claudia does as well. We teach people to point and to target jobs, to target companies, not particularly to spray and pray or to apply to a bunch of companies, which is, again, we could go on and on about that. But for argument's Claudia, we teach people to target jobs, and hopefully people are targeting their favorite jobs. So therefore, whoever you're interviewing with, hopefully, and that you have multiple interviews, that you're able to, interview with your favorite companies. So therefore, that should make you hopefully a little less sentimental about losing an opportunity or walking away from opportunity, especially doesn't seem right, especially if they're dragging out the interview process. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for companies, I would even say that if there really is like a 7, 8 interviews that you're trying to do through this process and there's different people, they should just go more towards like a panel interview, just because that person, I mean, it's also investing. They might be working. Now they have to like figure out like, do I take a half day? Do I take the day off? And how much do I prepare? And some of them even have to presentations and do all this type of work. So, I mean, if there's any HR people or companies listening, like just make it a panel interview. These are people's lives. Like they have other things to do, plus have family, plus their work, plus additional things. And then kind of like to what you were saying. And if I'm sorry, Mark, but what you were asking specifically more about like the interviews or?
Well, I was just making the comment that, people are targeting their companies, that they're actually interviewing with their favorite companies, hopefully, because making the distinction that if you're not interviewing with your favorite company, you're getting turned down, then you feel like, man, especially if you've gone through a number of interviews and then don't get it, and it definitely wasn't one of your favorite companies, and you didn't even have one, you have set yourself up for failure, not just from the point of starting from another process, but you feel like there's a failure because you have failed and not appealing to that one company. And there's a lot of emotional aspect to it. And then, Damian, I'm going to ask you to comment about the emotional aspect on it, because that's where your sweet spot really is. Claudia, I was just asking you to comment in the sense of that, yeah, people need to kind of be able to be agile in their approach, and that they're able to get to be points of interviews, like they could be at the beginning of one and the end of 2 others, in the middle of 2 others. Then maybe that verbiage of say, hey, I'm interviewing with others may matter more to as further down the line with a company, like in the mid nor towards the end, than you are at the beginning, where they really care much about you. They're just trying to feel you out.
Yeah. And I would even say that some people, like clients, that by the time they get to me, they'll say, well, I've, interviewed for jobs, but they keep offering me low salaries. And then when I look into it, I'm like, well, why are you applying to jobs that are below the salary threshold that you're looking for? So it's like almost setting themselves up for failure. So they're going through this interview process, and kind of, as you said, they might have multiple interviews, but then they feel hurt maybe because they're like, I thought I was a really great candidate. I've done some great work. I've done some achievements, but they keep lowballing me or keep giving me job offers with salaries that, it's even below what I'm making, or it's just a lateral move. And, one of the things that I always say is be very intentional when job searching. I like the imagery with spray and pray, but the analogy I like to use with clients is don't like if you're looking to buy like a Chanel bag, don't go to the dollar store. You're not going to find a Chanel bag. So stop applying to jobs that are not meeting your parameters or what you're looking for. You want a remote job, then focus on your job search for jobs that are just remote, and don't or even salary. So if you're looking to make that 20, 30K salary increase, look for jobs that offer that 20, 30K above what you're currently making. Don't look for the same job title and expect to get a 20, 30K salary increase. So be very intentional, because this is time invested through the interview process. And like we were talking about, sometimes it can take months. So being very intentional with your strategy, where you're applying, why you're applying for these jobs. Is it going to really be the next step in your career? Is it going to be that salary increase? Is this something you're going to be happy with? Does it match your lifestyle? Meaning, does it involve travel, or maybe you don't want to travel because you're starting a family? Whatever that is, be very intentional from the beginning. So that way, when you are moving through this process and it comes to like that end of like providing job offers, we already know it's aligned with what you're looking for, and it's not a surprise at that point.
Points, Claudia, and I know Damian's going to backtrack to you, but I also want him to talk about the emotional aspect of the fact that maybe having multiple interviews also means possibly being turned down multiple times, and maybe in a short period of time as well. Is that how, Damian, that people can kind of look at it? And I've always said, again, people need to become less sentimental, even though it might be your favorite company. So you go through that process, that you need to become less sentimental about them, because again, it's going to mean a little bit more to you than to them in most cases. But you're also going to need to handle now multiple possible rejections doing it that way. But it's probably the best way to fight the idea that you have to go through multiple interviews with one company as opposed with several companies.
And again, I can tell you from personal experience that when you're out of work and you have networked and you have the opportunity to interview for a position, especially I'm from Ohio, but a friend of mine here in North Carolina said when he was out of work that he felt lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. And my point is that when you're out of work, you are on an emotional wave where the highs are much higher and the lows are much lower. And there are various triggers, and there's shock, denial, there's anger, there's depression, there's momentary acceptance, and then there's rejection. And rejection is what drives the process around and around. But the amount of energy that you need to invest in interviewing for a particular position, especially when you are emotionally spent as a result of your professional identity, is immense. And so you have to pull everything you have in you to emote as a successful job searcher and leave all your doubts behind. Because if not, they'll be shouting in your head, you're not good enough, you're never going to make it, you're too old, whatever that may be. So you have to overcome all of that before you even walk in the door and interview. And your number one job and only job for a first interview is to get a second interview. And your number one task is to connect with the person more than even qualified. I mean, yes, you have the qualifications, but if that person doesn't like you, they're not going to hire you. And again, an immense amount of energy. I can remember having a day full of interviews that started at 7 in the morning and ended at 4 in the afternoon, every hour on the other. And I could barely make it to the plane because I was so exhausted. So here's my point. My point is that the more interviewing experience you have, the better you become. That's why we're such strong advocates of informational interviewing, which is a separate segment But the more that you're out there talking to people, meeting people, becoming comfortable talking to strangers, when you are at the weakest point professionally in your life, is a huge accomplishment. Okay, so what's the point? The point that I'm making is when you invest all of your social capital into only one position and that blows up in front of your face, you roll back and all of those insecurities and everything else that you felt negative bubble up and you have to battle it again. However, if you have a multi-stream process where you have a number of potential opportunities going on, yeah, it hurts, but knowing that that is not the only thing that you have going on, that you have a number of other good situations that you're working on, act as shock absorbers. And the 5 o'clock Club did a study, and their results were that 8 out of every 10 opportunities that you're actively interviewing, 8 will drop away without your ability to anticipate, plan, or control. And sometimes, the idiot brother-in-law is the one that gets hired simply because the owner said, put him somewhere. So that's my take on the emotional part of interviewing.
Yeah, and that kind of
And
leads into and I'm gonna come to you, Claudia. Hold that thought for a second. It's going to come into the fact that there are things that keep people from having multiple interviews, and you spoke to Damian information interviews, which if we brought it out, made it broader, that people don't prepare to be interviewed and are not ready to answer questions they need to, even with one, because really, just because it's the great resignation, it's the big reshuffle, and the big before, you're going to interview badly now with all the opportunities that are potentially at your fingertips. Go ahead, Claudia.
No, I was going to add, like, kind of to Damian, what he was saying, that there are so many reasons why, you may not get the job offer, not just, kind of like, maybe someone in the company is already going to bring in some of their family members, or like nepotism, or, maybe they just ended up got their budget cuts and all of a sudden they can't fill this position, or there's a freeze happening. So kind of like removing yourself. But I always, like, whatever the reason, because there literally can be like up to like 10 plus reasons why you didn't get the job offer. It's also asking, I have my clients, when like this happens, or just moving forward as a good practice, saying, you know what, I'm so, I'm glad that you're able to find a candidate. Of course, I'm sad to hear that I didn't get the position, but I'm looking to improve my interviewing skills, and I would love to get a little bit of your feedback, a little bit more on how I can improve. Would you be open to getting on a quick 15-20 minute call with me, so that way I can, work on my interviewing skills and strategies, and that way I can set me up for better opportunities. And of course, keep me in mind for any future opportunities. And the responses that my clients get when they get on a call now, HR people are not going to put this in writing in an email why you didn't get the interview. So this is why I'm saying to offer a 15-20 minute call, because they don't want to have proof of that. But once you get on a call with them, they're prone to be more honest. I even had a client where they were told, by the way, like, they really liked you. It's just we had to go someone with internally because we're trying to improve like promotions, but we are going to keep you in mind. And 3 months later, that same company came back. We now have a new job offer, like, in our team. Would you want to come back and interview? But even those reasons, like, you'd be surprised, and kind of Damian touched on a little bit on that. It's very common, or companies feel like they have to open it up, but they already have an internal candidate that's going to fill in that position, that's already been groomed for this position for 6-12 months at this point. But it's just kind of like that process, especially if it's like a federal or state entity where it's equal opportunity process. Like, they have to open it up to the public in order to create it as equal opportunity, but they already have the person in mind that's going to get the job.
Yeah, the other factors. Go ahead, Damian.
What I was going to say is the tipping point for me in the interviewing process that I went through. And truly, I mean, I've been out of work 3-4 times, and have had to interview for my life, if you will, because for many years I was the sole provider. But when I learned to step outside of myself and look at the hiring and getting a job as a process, not personal, that made a huge difference for me, because I was able to look at things kind of step by step, like a second person would, like an outsider. And when a human resource manager debriefed me or not, I was able to reduce the amount of feeling like an arrow had been shot through my heart, because I was looking at it as he or she is a person, I'm a person, a decision was made, I wasn't the one that was chosen, I'm okay about that, and I'm going to keep going, as opposed to what I was doing before was crumpling up and hiding for a week or two, under the desk from all of the rejection and all the other things that comes bubbling up. So my point is when you're going through the interview process, if you can teach yourself to step outside of yourself and look at the process as a process, you will interview better and you will have a better job search with not as many waves as most people feel.
Yeah, and that could be kind of tough to manage. I mean, you really have to not only be in charge of what goes on externally, but you also have to be in charge of what's going on with yourself and how you'll look at your company. And how you look at the company makes it's going to make all the difference in how you show up to them. If you don't feel like you're adequate, it's almost better sometimes to walk away from it, because it might be the way they make you feel. But there's so much on in the process that you have to manage your emotions, to manage the people that are talking to you. You also manage and kind of have a certain macro and micro companies. But one of the things I think people also like is they continue to stop trying to trying to find out more information as they go on with the interview. One of the things with longer interviews, it gives you opportunity to look very deeply at a company. In fact, even connect with just the person that potentially or may have referred you, but also other people that they know, and that they can, so you can get a good feel for them for several months, and to manage several possibilities that would really add more intel to your toolbox. Claudia, your thoughts?
Yeah. Like one of the things that I always say, like, especially with interview coaching, it's one thing that kind of to step in out of your, like, getting the emotions out of it is one, looking at the data. If you've had 5 interviews, you couldn't get past the first round of interviews, you probably need help with interview coaching skills. And, there's so many resources. I mean, Damian's book, listening to like these streams, like on how to improve your interviewing skills, look into that. But if it's more of like, you have to step out of it. It's not just, it's a skill set. It can be learned. It's nothing like it's innate that you're born with it or not. It has nothing to do with that. It's something that can be learned and refined and sharpened. So looking at the data really is going to help you say, okay, do I need to work on this? Because I have clients say, I need help with my resume. I'm like, all right, let's look at the data. How many jobs have you applied to? 10. How many interviews have you had from that? Oh, like 4 or 5. Okay, you don't need help with the resume. Maybe let's look at your interview. How many, like, do you make it to the last round? No, I never make it past the first round interviews. Okay, well then you don't need help with resume. You need help with your interviewing skills. And to that point, like, that can be learned and really practice to get you where you need to be. And like, just looking overall, like a lot of resources out there to really get you there, and kind of helping with like that stepping out of its zone, kind of like we're all talking about here, because it remove the emotion out of it, increase your opportunities. And one thing, a great strategy that I tell my clients is, if you're looking to the next step in a job, maybe you've never done this job before, go on LinkedIn and type in like the job title and that as their past role, and then reach out to that person and say, hey, can you, I noticed that you were a project manager and now you're managing your director of project management office. I would love to get on a quick call with you and ask them, can you tell me a little bit more, like from the project managers that you hire, like what is the hardest skill to hire for? Then they tell you, and now on when you're interviewing, you want to make sure that you touch on that specific skill set, because you already know it's hard to find it, and now you become like a top sought after candidate during the interview process. And I even have my clients ask, can you give me, Glassdoor has like a crazy range of like $50,000 to $120,000 for a project manager. What is a more specific range for a project manager in this industry, with my background? Well, then they can tell you, my project managers, we tend to pay them anywhere between 90 to 110. We also offer a 10% bonus based on performance. Okay, well, what makes you offer a candidate 110 in comparison to the 90K? And then they tell you, and then now the top skill sets to really showcase during the interview process, because it's almost like getting the answers to the test. And then it's all through the informational interviews, networking, connecting with people. And then you bring it through your interview process. And that's, helps you stand out. And then start changing the conversation. When I work with clients with interview coaching, we go through a mock interview. And questions I keep hearing over and over that they have is, can you tell me a little bit about the company culture? Can you tell me a little bit more about your onboarding process? Instead, everyone else is asking those questions. And that could be asked through your informational networking or connected with someone within the company. Use that time to say, by the way, I listened to or I reviewed your earnings call, and it looks like you're looking to penetrate a new market in the next upcoming quarter or in the second quarter, and you're actually looking to break into healthcare. My background actually is within healthcare, and I know I'll be a great asset to the team because I have, 10 plus years of experience within that industry. And I can, combine it with the skill sets that I already have, which will position me to be a great project manager when the time comes in order to meet the business goals in the next 3 to 6 months. That's a different conversation than, can you tell me about company culture? What made you work here?
Yeah. You make some great points. And I think one of the things too, that keep people that for folks is that they don't remain present in the moment to what the interviewer is saying all along. If you're not asking questions based on what they've said during the interview, you might have missed an opportunity to be heard, really, because what they're interested in is meeting. The only time that perhaps you may have had exposure to what they need is at that time. So even though you have a set of questions, and I think while people who do that, they have a leg up from people who don't ask questions at all. But I think the next tier is actually going back and say, hey, you mentioned this, and I see something a little bit differently. Can I tell you what that is? Now you've had this conversation that's based on that moment. And that's where a lot of interviewers are not trained, quite honestly, because they're not trained to answer back to get questions, getting canned answers, something that somebody's already prepared them to do, but they're not prepared to hear a rebuttal or a regurgitation of what they just said. Some are, but a lot of them aren't. Isn't that right, Damian?
Oh, absolutely. Many times when you're interviewing, and it depends on the company and sometimes the size, I did it myself, where you are given a list of questions by human resources, and only those questions, and you ask those questions in the time that you were allotted. And yeah, sometimes a candidate will throw you off your rhythm by asking you questions that you weren't anticipating. But the guts of the interview is what's on that sheet of paper. And then we used to get together afterwards and literally rate the candidate based on the way that they answered the questions. That was just corporate policy. Every division, every position, management position, asked those questions for that particular level. And going back to what Claudia was saying, yes, absolutely. Ask questions that shows how thoughtful you have been and how prepared you are. And earnings call, That's a brilliant question.
Mhm.
Absolutely brilliant. Another thing to talk about is be sure you read the in the news section of their website, because every news release is corporate speak. It's what they want the public and shareholders to believe about the company. And if they've just released a new product, I have found it very interesting to somehow work that in. And there's an immediate identification because they go, whoa, this guy really knows his stuff. Uh, Scour their website for interesting things. I can remember very quickly, I was in an interview and I talked about how the bank started after the Civil War in a hardware store above the Lowe's family, as in Lowe's Home Goods. And this was BB&T Bank. It wasn't called that originally. And the VP looked at me once, leaned back, looked at me again, and the whole conversation changed. He said, "How in the world would you possibly know that?" And I said, "Well,
Mm.
it was right on your website." He said, "I have been on that website hundreds of times, and I've never seen that." And I said, "Well, I'll send you the link." But sometimes, just like Claudia's earnings question can switch the whole mood of the interview, because what you've done is you have startled them out of the usual drone of interview questions, and they go, whoa, this person really has it. And that's an excellent strategy. And another strategy that you can use is, especially if the interviewing is taking a long time, or if this is a target person that you want to connect with, you surround them by contacting people that they report to, or that people who may work for report to, people around them. And it used to be with a phone call, but now with LinkedIn, you can do that. And here's why: you will create a buzz about you, about how good you are, how nice you are, how qualified you are, however you do it in LinkedIn. And you have surrounded this person by a halo of people that this person knows. I can guarantee you no other candidate is going to think like that. And it creates this kind of warm energy around you, because other people will talk about you after the interview and perhaps before the next interview. And OPS, if you walk through the building, many times they will recognize you, because that happened to me several times, and they will stop you and they will say good morning or how are you or whatever. That has a phenomenal impact on the person that's interviewing you, because you're now an insider. You're not just some outside talent. So those two things for me work over and over with the candidates that I work with.
Something else I want to talk about too, and I think this would be important for kind of a part, is the idea at this particular point that you know, people are shudder when I suggest that there are times that you'll need to walk away from opportunity, or that are kind of the illusion of what it is often a trap or a form of slavery, so to speak. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that there needs to be, at this particular time, if you're going to be interviewing with multiple companies, and you know, and really all of us should be doing that anyway. If you're looking for a job, whether it's a good economy or bad economy, you want to layer your opportunities. You want to just rely on just one, and that's part of the point of the whole this whole show. But the fact that you're getting multiple interviews, now you have to be willing and to kind of assess what's going to constitute you walking away from bad offers or bad opportunities. And it does take some courage to be able do that because people, they can't fathom walking away from an opportunity, especially used to having the only one present before them. Now that we're suggesting that this is interviewing 102 here instead of 101, now you get multiple, now start to dwindle your list down. And sometimes that may say, this isn't going real well. I need to start to rethink my strategy or to rethink about working with guys in regards to that.
Sorry, you kind of broke out, but yeah. So one of the things that I would say is, first, I mean, try to do your due diligence even before the interview process, because especially right now, what's been happening, and I've been seeing this a lot happening, is because of COVID, there are some companies that they just don't know how to manage. They've been impacted financially, so they'll get a job and then they'll get laid off in a few months, or they're set up to fail from the beginning. It's like the writing is on the wall, and that's when you kind of want to retract or maybe not even apply. Where what I've seen is, companies have laid off people in the past, 16, 18 months. And now maybe they had a team of 10 and they want you're applying for like the director position. But now you have to meet the same quota, but you only have a team of 3. And at that point, you're set up to fail. So really understanding of like, kind of to your point, like when you're asking also these questions, like look at their earnings call. What are they looking to do? What are they looking to achieve? Are they in the red from like last quarter? Now they need to make up that number. Well, that's probably going to be a reorg happening or a layoffs happening in the next upcoming months. Or looking at like where are they looking to just overall go? Because if you're let's just say an engineer, and you realize that the company is really looking they already created a new product, kind of like Damian's example. They're looking now to market it. And that's where they're really focusing, putting all their resources in. Well, then you as an engineer, you're probably thinking, okay, well, maybe let's look at, is all the resources going to sales and marketing, maybe not engineering? Or are they going to do cutoffs for the engineering team in that way? And now I'm going to be overworking, which is very common. People are being just burnt out. They're just worked to the ground because they're less resources, less people, and now it's falling on the burden on all the people that are staying and still employed. So really looking into that, and a good way to find out, is this a good company to be working for? Is kind of, again, to that point, and Damian too, like contact the people currently working there and ask them, can you tell me a little bit more about this? What does this workload look like? And then some people will be honest. They'll say, like, honestly, if you enjoy like work being your life, then yes, this will be a great role for you, because you're not going to have time for anything else. And that's when getting this information can help you. And you can say, you know what, thank you for your time, but I would like to retract my application. Thank you for this opportunity, and best of luck with your endeavors in finding this position in this role. But there are times that it is a good strategy to kind of just pull back, because you don't want to trade one bad company for another bad company and just call it by a different name.
Yeah, exactly. And Damian, but supposedly, and I believe that referrals also deepens your possibilities versus the ones that you don't have the referral. Let's say you got the opportunity of applying online, that really the one that actions online, the statistics show that they have less of an investment than the person that has been referred you to them, because that's one of their people that really they're saying, if this person like this person then should do well, we need to give him a prioritized chance to make it in.
I want to back up for a quick minute on what Claudia said. Another time when you need to walk away from an interview is when your intuition is telling you one thing and the interviewers are telling you another. And so I always ask people, especially if it's offer A versus offer B, in the end, how does it feel? If it doesn't feel right, follow your intuition, because I will tell you honestly, every time I did not follow my intuition and walk away, I got burned. So keep that in mind. along with everything else. And the other thing that goes with that is think about how you are being treated as a candidate as a whole. Meaning, do they call you one day and expect you to drop everything and be there for an interview tomorrow? When you're there for the
Mhm.
interview, do you have to wait because everybody's late? Are you all ready for an interview and you get a call the day before and everything's canceled? It tells you a lot about the company and the way that they view your people. Um, so that's
Mhm.
the one thing I want to say. And then, Mark, going back to what you're saying about referrals, absolutely. Many times companies will have an internal program. I know our company did, where you got paid, $150 if a person that you referred to the company got hired, because human resources recognized that a potential employee had a greater chance of being a match if the person came from a referral, either by an employee or someone that called on the company or whatever. And in fact, there are still companies where and this was common when I first moved down here. If you did not have a family member working for this particular companies, you couldn't get in because it was highly desirable, and it was just family, family, family all the way around. And what I
Mhm.
learned there is, you can't swim upstream easily. It's much easier to go with the flow, follow your feelings, and go with what your intuition says. And if your intuition says walk away, follow your intuition.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's really important for your intuition to speak loud enough for you to be able to do that. Walking away to me is a viable strategy only because because you are very clear about what you want. If you're
Mhm.
unclear and then you're going to feel like you're walking into the unknown, then it's likely you're able to feel empowered to do that. But I think there is an aspect of it too where you have the clarity, you've done all the research prior to your job search. And let me just emphasize that salary, again, the salary station that one, you need to do that homework and at least the initial homework before you even take a look at your first job or the first work for, because without that clarity, then you can get caught up in the trap, because many companies are also asking that question, that salary question up front, asking the compensation question up front, and you be ready to or be to answer it. And it's better to be in both positions, because there might be a rare time when you might need to give them somewhat of a range, especially if you like the company. Hopefully, you've done enough research, which includes the compensation aspect, where you say, I really like this company. I kind of know what I'm expect. I want to be able to optimize my opportunities by looking at what they may have and what my possibilities and what my needs are. But all of that, when you're able to walk away, then you really do find out where the heart of the company often is at. Because if they really want you, then that would be the time in saying, as we talked about before, saying, hey, really do like you, and consider you one of our top candidates. But you can also ask them, say, hey, is there anything, and this is a question that I think more people begin to ask, hey, what is keeping you from hiring me? What is it that I'm missing?
Ah,
What is it that I need? What is it I need to know that you haven't told me yet? That's keeping me from being your candidate. Then they'll get the honesty. And I remember I had a client that I said, hey, go. They're hedging their bets. Ask them that question. Again, I think I shared this once with you, Damian. The response they got back was, say, well, we like you. We just don't feel like you can. It's a, we question whether you can. So for him, he was closer to 50. What it's saying is, we think you're too old to keep up with our fast-paced environment. But I think it does help to kind of be able to read in between the lines as well, not particularly what a company says, but also what a company doesn't say. Speak
Yes.
volumes. Damian, you want to comment on that?
I do. Another aspect of what they may or may not say is study up on nonverbal communication, especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing a Zoom interview or even better when you're in person, because many times you will learn a lot more by watching their face and watching their nonverbals, because unless you're very practiced and very polished, it's very hard to hide what you're really feeling with your
Mm-hmm.
nonverbals. And again, if you're getting a conflicting message, right? They're saying one thing, and their hands and face are saying another. Beware. Example: one of the interview questions that I asked when I came down here is, in this company, do most people work past 5 o'clock? And you could have watched her eyes kind of going, rip, 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 rip. And she said, "Oh no, of course not. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
leaves at 5 o'clock every day, and even a little early, 4:30 on Fridays." And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
okay, great, thanks. I walked up to their parking lot, and at 7 o'clock, the parking lot was full. And I thought, that's interesting. So that's my spin on nonverbal communication. Again, very important,
Mm-hmm.
and also your nonverbal communication is very important, and that's why
Mm-hmm.
being coached on how to interview,
Mhm.
practicing interviewing, going out and meeting people, all of those things not only helps with your confidence, it helps with your interviewing skills, and along with polishing your interviewing skills, so will your nonverbal communication be polished when it comes to interviewing.
Claudia?
Yeah. Another kind of like, I love that question because I always have clients ask that same question towards the end, because there's always an elephant in the room, and they
True.
might not said it in the job description. Most job descriptions, there was like a stat that 61% of people that got the job feel that what they're doing does not match what the job description said. So,
Right. Mm-hmm.
what I like to say is, and kind of like a different version of that, or actually there's two different versions. And it's like a sales strategy. They call it writing the bull, but it's asking towards the end, do I have your support and moving forward to next steps? And then
Good.
just waiting and letting them know.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they give you a reason, well, you know what, kind of to your point, Mark, yeah, we do. I think you're really great, but we're really looking for someone with a little bit more management experience. Okay. I definitely understand that. Can you tell me a little bit more? What specific skill set are you looking for as management experience? Is it more in like profit and loss management, budget management, allocation? Are you looking more for someone that's managed bigger teams? Because you want to dissect it, because sometimes they don't know. They're just saying that, or maybe they're making some assumptions that you don't even know. And that way you can kind of hone in a little bit more. Well, you know what? Yeah, you only manage 7 people, but this team is going to be about 30. Okay. And then have a reason, I definitely understand that, I have only managed at this point in my time in my career 7 people, but I'm also part of this volunteer board where I manage over 60 volunteers. And what I've learned is I have a lot of these transferable skills on how to, manage people, how to manage emotions, how to make sure I abide by like the company guidelines to make sure that I'm not putting the company or my employees at risk, and kind of going through that and then asking them again in a different way. So based on that, do you have any hesitations about my background or me fulfilling this job successfully? And then just you keep asking that question, and then it also avoids you feeling like maybe I should have said this, or I shouldn't have said that, or I don't know how I did, and friends are asking you, how did the interview go? I think good. I don't know. Like I should be hearing back from them. When you're asking this question during the interview process, you kind of have that peace of mind saying, okay, they told me I was great, and actually I should be hearing from them, and I'm moving to next steps, and then you can go about your day, with peace. And if they did give you a rebuttal of not enough management experience or whatever that may be, then you can address it during the interview, and then immediately send a thank you email saying, by the way, it was great speaking with you, Mark. I really enjoyed our conversation. I've been really thinking about, what you mentioned about, my background, especially my management, and not being able to have managed this many people. But, here's kind of like what I want to let you know, like how I would approach this if I were to be in this position. And you can send them like your 30, 60, 90-day plan. I mean, there's different ways that you can do, but address it in the thank you email. So that way, again, you're building a business case on why you're a good fit, and that shouldn't be preventing you from either getting a job offer or moving to the next step in the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
An extension of all what you, Damian, have said, you can also use that intelligence if you're dissecting those questions afterwards about what you're missing or what they feel that you're lacking. You can use that bit of intelligence towards the other interviews that you have to fill in those blanks if there are consistent blanks that are missing. And you're finding that's consistent, you can fill it in there with the other companies. And I've heard a suggestion before. I never make claims of it, but I think it's one of the best ways. If you rate the companies you want to be with, you start trying to interview and get intel on the ones that are lowest on your list. So when you get to the ones that are higher up, you're much more ready to interview with the Googles and the Microsofts rather than the small startups companies that you hope that you like, but you wrap up then down. So that's just a suggestion. Is your skills that way, so by the time you get to Google and Microsoft, you're at the game rather than interviewing with and not being at the top of your game. So I think that's a great strategy. Let's say I can't lay claim to that one. In the meantime, we have a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. Thank you very much, Claudia, for joining us. You got anything that people should be looking towards?
So right now, I just created a kind of career coaching course. It's called 90-Day Job Offer. So that way, it takes the candidate through the entire process. And within 90 days, my clients are already negotiating salary offers. Now, timeline is really dictated by the candidate, but that I'm just currently releasing that. And that's what's been happening. And of course, I'm always happy to get on calls if you have any career questions or want to learn about career strategy. One of the things that I've seen is kind of like where people right now, especially it is very competitive, it is very saturated market. People taking kind of like that blame on themselves saying, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Maybe a kind of thing, I might be like getting older. I am in like this age range or whatever that is. Instead, pull yourself away, work with like a professional and see like, is this something, what is the data telling you? Because we've been doing this now for some time and we have experience and worked and helped a lot of clients get jobs. Mm-hmm. Go with someone and reach out. And obviously you can even come in here and ask questions and, really get a better insight as opposed to kind of like huddling in a corner saying, I'm not good enough, or I thought I was great and clearly I'm not. It's so competitive. I should be grateful to have a job. And there's a lot of opportunities there. There are companies that are thriving and growing. And yes, it is always a good idea to negotiate your salary. Yes, if you should be moving to the next step in your career, there's no reason why you shouldn't. And even if you feel like you feel hopeless and like it's never going to work out for you, it's just a matter of like the strategy you're using is not working. Work with someone or find another strategy that'll get you where you want to be at. But, they can always find me on claudiatmiller.com or on LinkedIn at Claudia T. Miller. If you want to get a little bit more additional career advice and strategies, I'm always happy to share with the audience just to help them around like this time of need, where it is competitive out there. There's still like a high rate of unemployment, but jobs are out there and opportunities are there at a salary you'll love.
Awesome.
Good deal.
Awesome. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us again. First time you were a co-host. Now you got a chance to be a guest on the show. So thank you for both times. Love having you both times. And you'll probably be back again. Anyway, Damian.
Thank you both.
Anything? Damian, what else you got going
on? Before I go there real quickly, Claudia, thank you. I think the probing question about, next step and keep asking it different ways until you get an answer. outstanding. I mean, I think that is an excellent way to be able to walk out of an interview and not be insecure and know that you've done everything possible to interview correctly. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Really well,
Mhm.
very well done. And for me, Mark, I have a couple of articles or quotes, if you will, that are coming out in upjourney.com. I'm working with Kathleen Fiore on another upcoming article, and am just staying busy. And much like Claudia, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or jobsearching.org. And one other thought, and that is if you are feeling really bad or really down, consider doing two things. One, if you need counseling, there are resources out there like family services in our area where the fee is determined by your income. And if your income is zero, then guess what? You can get the help that you need to get you going again at no charge. And my final thought is there are support groups out there, like Professionals in Transition, that do not charge. And if you can align yourself with a support group, either in person or on Zoom, you're no longer going to go through your job search journey alone. And that can be very helpful because I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, there would be no Professionals in Transition if I hadn't lost my job, if I weren't looking for emotional support, strategic help, networking opportunities, and other jobs that I would either never know of or never see. So there's a lot of good people out there, Claudia, Mark, myself, and a number of other good people out on the web that stand ready to help you. And so I'd like to conclude by saying, thank you, Claudia. Awesome as always. And Mark, another phenomenal show. And thank you.
No, thank
Thank
you, sir,
you.
for being here. Claudia, as always. I have lots coming up. I can't even begin, but just a couple of new articles, one on my medium and injustice. I have it. I'll be putting that out there today. It's already been published on my Medium column, and then also on the Voice of Job Seekers. I have an audio coming. I'll be publishing tomorrow as well. And also, just miss these upcoming shows that are on the Modern Job Search Checklist. Next week is Rashonda Green. She's going to be joining us next week. Randy, I forgot his last name, Damian. What's his
Wooden,
last name?
Randy
Wooden.
Wooden.
Yes, he'll be joining us on the 30th. And then did we get a confirmation from his partner?
I thought that he was communicating directly with you, but I'll be happy to call Teddy Burrs if you'd like.
Teddy, and Teddy has a local group that he works with, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. He works with job seekers, and also Randy and Teddy have a show on YouTube that you should go find out. I can't think of, but we would definitely post them on, and we get to hear for 2 weeks in a row about this show. There you go. In the meantime, thank you very much. Join us next Friday. We're always streaming to YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we're always here 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. Thank you all for joining us. We didn't talk much to you guys because we had a lot to cover. That's a rarity. But next week, we're going to open up the chat and make sure that you guys are involved. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great weekend and a great week.